Marvel Mystery Oil is an incredibly common fuel and oil additive that supposedly does a lot of different things to benefit the health of your engine's fuel system and or the health of your engine in general, such as cleaning up the crankcase or whatever it might be, cleaning up, carbon deposits and sludge like that in the valve train, combustion chamber, whatever. I have used this on 2 different fill-ups for my Mustang, and I have to say that I experienced less than stellar results, at least definitely in compared to something that this is commonly compared to. It's essentially direct competition to Seafoam. I've used both of these products. I have absolutely no affiliation with either one of them. Obviously, I'm a super small channel. I don't have any skin in this game, but I will give you my own personal experience, and based off of my personal experience, which I do admit is a sample size of only a couple cars, but if I can pass on any information that I've learned, I figure might as well. So, just for reference, on the back of this bottle it says directions for use. The first one that is mentioned is in fuel, and it says 4 ounces, treat 10 gallons. Further on, it also says for 4 cycles specifically, half an ounce to 1 ounce per gallon, and in 2 cycle, also half an ounce to 1 ounce per gallon. It also mentions oil, where it says you can replace up to 20% of your oil with Marvel Mystery Oil to supposedly clean the crankcase of your engine basically, and to apparently soften seals and clear up any deposits and stuff like that that might be in your engine. I have not tried this in the crankcase, and I don't really know if I am going to personally. I have, however, tried it as a fuel additive 2 different times in my Mustang, like I had mentioned, and here are the results that I experienced. Like I had mentioned, it recommends putting 4 ounces per gallon of Marvel Mystery. No, it does not. What I meant to say is 4 ounces per 10 gallons. This is a 16 point something gallon tank, so I measured it out to make sure that we had the right ratio no matter what every time it was going in, and what I experienced was a car that ran like complete and total garbage, not just when this was in the fuel, but afterward. And something you may be thinking is, well, that kind of makes sense. It's obviously going to, I guess, for lack of a better word, degrade the quality or the energy of the fuel, because this is not gasoline, it is just an oil. It's not going to combust the same way that gas will. And that's true, but the other thing that you might be thinking is that I have a 93 race tune on my car, and obviously putting in 93 and running Marvel Mystery Oil in it is probably not going to work particularly well with that tune. Well, first of all, this tune is able to adapt down to 91 octane. You can run either one, and the ECU will automatically pull or advance timing to match, so that there's no detonation that happens whichever fuel you're using, as long as it is premium of some sort, so 91 and up. But second of all, on that point, I did actually revert this car back to the stock tune. This car is able to run on 87 octane, so just in case the Marvel Mystery Oil made that big of a difference on the fuel, and what the octane level was read at, I did put this car on its stock tune to hopefully help it run a little bit better while the Marvel Mystery Oil was in the gasoline. And here's what I experienced. While the Marvel Mystery Oil was in the tank, through the 2 tanks that I ran it through, I was having very, very bad issues with idling. Occasionally bad enough that I would start the car and the RPMs would literally go and just immediately die. Multiple times in a row. So I would have to keep blipping the throttle to keep the RPMs up, and eventually the ECU would typically learn to keep the car idling. Not very well, but idling at least a little bit for maybe 5 or maybe 10 seconds at a time, but normally you would end up stumbling and dying again. Throttle response with the stock tune, which granted it is the stock tune compared to what I'm used to, I know it's going to be worse, but it was noticeably worse than I would have expected, and very jumpy and jerky, and just overall the drivability with the Marvel Mystery Oil in the tank. I'm saying it so weird every time, I'm sorry. I don't know what sort of speech impediment I have for this video, but apparently it's something. But the Marvel Mystery Oil in the tank did heavily affect the way that the car ran, and generally it ran pretty bad. So as soon as I possibly could, once running all of it through the tank basically, or as much as possible, I got another tank of 93 and ran that through the car, and it was still kind of running not great, and I was, kind of like, all right, well, we'll keep on running it. I don't know, maybe there's just a little bit that's still left in the system and it's gonna take a little bit for it to clear out, whatever. But then I got another tank of 93 and I put the 93 race tune back on the car, and it was still having issues with the throttle response. I'd mentioned before, kind of a stumble that this car occasionally does when it comes to like rev matching and stuff like that. When downshifting, occasionally there'd be like a weird stumble instead of the throttle blipping like you'd expect, and occasionally it has low speed drivability issues, and that was very accentuated even after this had already been not in the car's fuel for like 2 tanks. The residual effects of me having run it were still there. And it could very well be that the fueling needs of this particular car with this particular ECU just really did not gel well with this product. But regardless, it's not something that I think I would necessarily recommend for use in fuel at this point, considering how heavily it negatively affected the Mustang even after having been in it, when this is something that is supposed to clean the fuel system. Instead, it seems like it must have left some form of residue or film in the fuel system that was negatively affecting performance. And again, for something that says that it is going to, I think in its words, it cleans and lubricates the fuel system or whatever. It also mentions that you can use at every fill up as part of regular engine maintenance, can lead to improved fuel economy, use at every oil change for optimal performance, use product only as directed, blah blah blah. Of course, use it as directed, that seems very obvious, but regardless, it literally recommends using it at every single fill up, and then I assume they're talking about fuel fill up since it literally recommends shortly thereafter oil changes as a separate thing. And again, I just don't know how I feel about that being something that's suggested on this, considering my own personal experience with it. And I'm not naive enough to say that my experience is going to affect literally everyone, because like I said, this is a sample size for this product of one vehicle, and I'm of the belief that, you know, there's people that will get a car, for instance, they buy a Ford product or they buy some sort of GM product like a Buick or a Chevy or something, and they have issues with it and they never ever buy anything again, and they talk down those products for the rest of their life. Well, lemons happen, and there's also, beyond lemons, specific, you know, a specific individual product that just does not gel well with another product. It happens. So I'm not saying that you should not use this no matter what, but I do want to at least express my own personal experience with it if it makes any difference for you. And I say that because when compared to another product that I have used without any issue that basically says it does all the same things as this, which is Seafoam, I had much better results with Seafoam than I ever had with Marvel Mystery Oil. Marvel Mystery Oil is slightly cheaper than Seafoam. Not a lot, but there is a little bit of a price difference between them, so I can see why, if the two of them were to perform similarly, why you would want to do them. And in a crankcase, as a oil additive, they may perform similarly to, you know, flush an engine out or something like that. Obviously, Marvel Mystery Oil is more of an oily consistency than Seafoam is. So as an oil change like additive over the entire course of an oil change interval, that's something that Marvel Mystery Oil is more commonly used for than Seafoam, which is not really what Seafoam is intended for. But as a fuel additive, I have used Seafoam multiple times on multiple different vehicles at this point. I use the Seafoam spray for my Dakota when I did a tune-up on it a little while back. I also used Seafoam as a fuel additive in the Dakota. I used it fairly concentrated, more concentrated than the Marvel Mystery Oil, and it didn't have any issues running with that in it. It didn't affect the way it ran. It didn't make it run poorly. There was no lack of power. There was no backfiring or any sort of weird detonation issues or something like that. And I just recently ran a can of Seafoam through the fuel system of my Mustang to try and clear out what residual effects the Marvel Mystery Oil had, and it seems to have done that. The car is typically idling better. The car is running better overall. There's less issues with the surging, you know, at low RPM and the sort of hesitation that you would get on rev matches occasionally and stuff like that. Overall, the car seems to run slightly better than it did before, and even since running the Marvel Mystery Oil in it. So this is my own experience, and I would absolutely recommend to do your own separate research on this, but if you're looking for my opinion on which is better to run as a fuel additive, it seems clear to me, at least from my own personal experience, that Seafoam is a better performing product in pretty much every way in comparison to Marvel Mystery Oil. Please do take this with a grain of salt, of course, because like I said, this is only a small sample size, but at least in my own personal testing and experience, this is what happened. So if that's of any value to you, then hopefully this information has been helpful. I am curious to potentially use Marvel Mystery Oil here as an oil additive in an oil change, possibly in the future for the Dakota when I change out the valve covers. If we can get a look at the valve train beforehand and after running this through an oil change and see if it made any sort of difference, that would be a really good example to see how this might be useful for its other intended purpose and just struggles a little bit more with something else that it supposedly can do. With all of that being said, I hope that you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, please consider subscribing to the channel. It really, really helps out, and I will see you guys in the next one.